Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have Mr. Brandon Garrett on with me today. Hey, Brandon.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Brandon has been on our podcast in the past, and he was doing something different than what he's doing now. And so I love highlighting people's journeys because, people don't just arrive at where they're at. There's a lot of changes and pivoting and a journey to where we end up. And so now Brandon is acquiring businesses, and he was doing something very different before. So just so everybody can know him in case you don't, I'm going to go ahead and just read a short bio. So Brandon Garrett believes in building strong relationships that lead to profitable growth in highly competitive markets. He has consistently grown millions of dollars in revenue in multiple industries through improving any team's performance. Brandon's family history is in the mountains and foothills of Tennessee. Brandon believes deeply in the power and spirit of private companies and entrepreneurs as the backbone of our great country. He is working to build a portfolio between 150 and $250 million of assets under management of well-established small and mid-sized businesses with great reputations and brands in the manufacturing, logistics, and construction home services industry in America's heartland to generate more growth and opportunities for upcoming generations. Ultimately, this is designed to help fund Brandon's bigger vision of replicating what Williamson County Schools have created with their Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center in as many school districts in the U.S. as possible, starting in America's heartland. So, Brandon, just so people get to know you, why don't you start out? You don't have to you do have another podcast with your whole story, but
Right.
start out and give us snippets of, where you started out and how you got to be doing what you're doing now and how you, pivoted and changed to do this new mission.
Yeah. So, because you're right, it's been a while since I was on the podcast, and yeah, things definitely have changed. And I like that you highlight like it's like what we see on social media or what you see online or the soundbite that you get when you go to a networking event. Like that's just the highlight reel. That like that's the peak, right? There's an entire story behind everybody's journey, including my own. So like where I'm at now is, it's 20 years of work. This is not just like a sudden like 2 or 3 or even 5-year thing. Like I spent 2 decades in corporate America in various levels of senior leadership at Fortune 500 to 200 companies. Went through the crash of '08, ended up getting laid off, was homeless a little bit of time after that. And had to kind of reinvent myself, change careers and industries, and then eventually got tired of doing what I affectionately refer to as the impossible for the ungrateful. So I left corporate and jumped off the cliff and started building a plane on the way down. Started my first company as an insurance brokerage right before the pandemic. Did very well with that. I went from, startup to 23 business accounts in about the first 6 months or so, as we were specializing in voluntary benefits and group health benefits for small businesses. But turn the corner at the end of that first year, COVID comes around, and almost all those businesses were deemed non-essential. And when people aren't working, they don't have money to pay their insurance benefits. So this business pretty well disappeared overnight. So I've, built one, lost one. I still maintain that entity. It's very, very small now. It's a business line, an industry I'll get back into because it's not going anywhere. But through that, I started investing in myself. And that's probably the biggest thing I would encourage everyone to do is make sure you are invest in yourself. Don't go drop that, that $1,500 on an iPhone or $1,000 on a TV, or even as much as I will probably get some flack for saying it, $20,000 or $30,000 a year on college. Like really focus on investing in yourself in a way that's going to grow your skill set and allow you to add value out there, because that's what it comes down to. So through that process, I got linked up with another group, another startup company, a sales as a service company, which is how you and I actually met. Helped grow that to 8 figures in about 2 years. Got to work with really cool people, and then along the way, kind of built some additional skills and stuff that allowed me to make a pivot over the last year or so into acquisitions full time, which is what I'm doing now.
Beautiful. So, what attracted you to acquisitions?
Well, it's something I knew I always wanted to get into, just because that's where the big money's at. And when I say that, it's not because it's about the money, but at the end of the day, we have to break free of this concept of this mental handcuffs that are put on us at a young age that, hey, go to school, go to college, get a good job, work 9 to 5, work 40 years, retire, have your 401k and live happily ever after. Like that's a terrible proposition. That's not always really what works out. So, being in the acquisition space allows you to start acquiring some cash producing assets. Because of my business background, that's why I chose acquisitions versus like real estate or multifamily or commercial development, anything like that. I may get into that eventually, but that just this is a natural transition for me. Because I knew I needed to have something that was going to generate enough cash that would allow me to go out and kind of do the things that I'm called to do while I've got another 40 years or so. Because at the end of the day, anything good that anyone does comes from funding. I mean, Mother Teresa, everybody knows Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was funded and very well funded at that. So, yes, you can donate your time and all that stuff's very, very important. But when you want to have, a bigger and bigger impact, the way the world is set up, that requires some monetary exchange. So that's why, I finally was able to make the leap into acquisition so I can continue, on that path. And you kind of highlighted that in the intro of, reinvesting in America's youth, because we've gotten away from that here.
Exactly. So right now, acquisitions is kind of a popular thing. I mean, I was telling you, I listened to Cody Sanchez on YouTube, and she's talking about buying these, little business for assets. But, not everybody has the skill, not only just to acquire them, because there's a skill to that, but you have to be able to either have operators or yourself know how to make a business profitable, because you could buy a business, and I see this in my healthcare profession. New doctors buy a business of a doctor that's been there for 40 years, and all the patients leave, and they're stuck with a
Right.
shell of a business. So, I mean, there's certain skills. So what would you tell people who are interested in this? What skills do they need?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. There's a variety of skills you need to be mindful of, separate of just going out and acquiring the business itself, having that understanding, which is not a solo enterprise. Like, I will not misrepresent that at all. I am absolutely not doing this on my own. Like, I've got a team of amazing people around me that I've been able to network with over the years. And, a bulk of them came from making an investment into, a high level mastermind. Because it's not a solo enterprise. Like I don't know enough about finances. I don't know enough about legal. I don't like, there's a whole slew of things in there. But ultimately, even if you go out and get that team, you're absolutely right, Kimberly. Like, you have to know how to run and manage and grow a business independent of that. If you don't, you're going to end up buying yourself a job. Now, that's not to say that that's not necessarily a bad fit for some people, but if you're wanting to not get yourself back into the very thing that you're in now, you have to acquire a business that either you're able to grow to that point, knowing that, hey, I'm going to be in the trenches for a little while and then I'm going to be able to step away, or you just have to get one that's already built up, because you don't want to be the dancing bear, or what I call the chief everything officer. There's a lot of those out there. A franchise is a perfect example. You can get into a franchise relatively cheap, and I'm not speaking ill of franchises. It's just not a model that I would like to invest in. But a lot of them out there, you're really buying yourself a job. It's just a very high paying job, and you've got a business in a box, so to speak, which, if you're not comfortable getting into a full-blown business where you got to figure out on your own, franchises can be a great way to kind of cut your teeth, because not everyone has, a background of being in corporate and having P&L responsibility for, 9 figures and 700 employees and like all this other stuff that I've spent decades doing. That's the first thing you've got to establish is like, hey, do I have the skill set, and do I have the necessary resources and people around me? If I go acquire this thing, I'm going to be able to maintain it and grow it, because once you do that, you're taking on a pretty significant responsibility. And that's the thing that doesn't get talked about in M&A circles even very much. It's one thing if you're the solopreneur, you're the dancing bear, you're the chief everything officer, and it's just you, and you have to get out there and grind to put food on your table. That's one thing. But if you're acquiring a functioning business, the game changes completely, because now you're going to have 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 employees whose families depend on their spouse, their mom, their dad to have that income coming in to put food on their table, to put a roof over their head. So the scope of responsibility becomes significantly larger the moment you acquire that business. And it's not something you can just like hey, okay, I own it now, go have fun. Like you still you still have to have some involvement to make sure the business stays on track. One, to protect your investment, but two, to protect the people and the employees you got, because that's really the biggest part of the investment that you're making, is that commitment to them and in those families, because small businesses are the backbone of the economy. I mean, as defined by the Small Business Administration, like 90+% of all businesses and employees fall in a small business category. Like that is literally the largest portion of the economy. So it's a very important responsibility that people don't really talk about much.
Yeah, and speaking of employees, so uh, being that you don't want to go in and be an operator, these businesses have to have an operator there, either the old owner for a year or two, or whoever their operator is, and then, like you said, the employees. So when you go into a company, you know, of course, everybody's worried about, are they going to lose their job when this new company comes in? So
Hmm.
how do you get their trust? How do you give them, like, help them feel secure?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and you're right, because there's a lot of that goes on, especially if private equity gets involved. There's that legend or myth, and it's not unwarranted in the private equity space, where they go in and chop these businesses up and sell them off for parts, like a almost like a stolen car. And again, I'm not necessarily speaking bad of private equity, but that's the reality and the feeling that a lot of people have when they hear, oh, this outside investor is going to come in and buy the company, right? So what I do really hinges on building those relationships as early on as possible. Now, each deal is different, so you may or may not get an interaction with the employees during what's called due diligence. After you've kind of had some conversations with the owner, you may have a letter of intent signed and all that, because every owner is gonna want to handle that situation delicately. But how I communicate that when I start working with the owners is hey, like, when is appropriate for you, I would love the opportunity for all of us to kind of have a meeting, sit down, come together, do some introductions, and take care of any questions that they may have, and ultimately kind of share with them the vision that you highlighted. Like, hey, why I'm here. This is why I'm acquiring the company. You guys are, and give them that assurance. Like, hey, no
Mhm.
one, we may do things different, but everyone's safe. No one's going to lose their job, and ultimately, my role here is to make your guys' jobs easier. Like, we're going to be having conversations, understanding what problems you're facing, and how I, in my role, can remove that obstacle that's making your job more difficult, so you can come in and be efficient, get the things done that you need to do, and enjoy your time while you're here. Because having been a frontline employee for the first part of my career in manufacturing, no less, like, there's nothing more frustrating than having to come into work every single day and run a piece of equipment that, yeah, it works, but like it barely works. And like, it's
Yeah.
really tough for me to hit my productivity numbers because I have to argue with the machine 8-10 hours a day. Like, that is so demoralizing, so frustrating. So I go in and give them that assurance, like, hey, we're going to talk about things, like, we're going to make some decisions, and we're going to grow this thing and give you guys more opportunity and make your life easier, and get them bought into that. Because at the end of the day, like I said, that's truly what I believe, that small businesses are the backbone of America. They are the backbone of any economy, whether it's here in the United States or elsewhere. And there are some businesses that have been mistreated by larger entities that they get bought up by. So I'm kind of like putting on my superhero cape, so to speak, and being Batman or whatever, to go out and kind of protect Gotham from from the jokers of private equity and big investors, because we need to bring that kind of stuff and that attention and that focus back, because we are now seeing the consequences of those short-sighted decisions, here in the U.S. with how the economy is functioning, with supply chain issues that was exposed, globally during the pandemic and things like that. So, that's I just go in and lay it all out there. Like, I'm completely transparent with everyone and say, hey, this is the mission we're on. Let's go together and stick my hand out and go on down the road with them.
Cool. So when you're acquiring a business and you've bought it now, um, this might vary too, but how long does it take you to really get things moving smoothly and getting things going where,
Mhm.
the operators, the management there can be handling everything and you're just checking your numbers, you're checking in. What does it
Right.
take to get to that point?
And you're right. There's a lot of variability there. It depends on how put together things are to begin with. Typically, even if something's very systemized, very process driven, which is what investors like to see. Like we want to see a repeatable process. That's why franchise models are so good. That's why McDonald's is so successful, or pick another one because they know that, hey, we've got everything dialed in. Like you follow this instructions, we're going to get a consistent product, and we know we're going to get $3 million out of this particular store run by a bunch of high school students and a couple of high school or college grads. Like that's their process, right? So depending on how much of that is present, really will dictate that length of time. But it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months really just to handle the transition piece alone, and then start to implement some changes to create those systems and those processes. 90 days would be on the short end. 6 months is really, I don't like to tinker really too much before that, unless there's been a lot of involvement ahead of the sale to get that employee buy-in and things, because the last thing you want to do is upset the apple cart when everything is already running so smooth. Because to your point, like you made with the prior question, that adds to that, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my job as a new owner? Now we're doing everything different. So it's kind of a delicate balance, but at least 6 months is really kind of the time frame I think that we look at before you've really got your arms around everything and you can start to comfortably be making some significant changes.
Exactly. So when you're deciding which businesses to buy, what's the criteria? What are you looking for? You mentioned processes
Mm-hmm.
and systems.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's any number of factors to look at, and all of those things can kind of play into either increasing the value of the business to an investor or decrease it. And every investor has a different risk tolerance. Like some things that might be an issue for somebody else, someone that's not process and system driven, like myself with my background, like that might be a huge risk exposure for them, and they may not like that. To me, no big deal. Like I can come in and iron that stuff out real quick. That's not a concern. Biggest thing, we start with is just the big items. Like, hey, what's the sales revenue? What's the profitability? How many employees do they have? How long have they been in business? And what role does the owner play? Those are the big 5 criteria I look for right out of the gate. Because if the business isn't big enough, they're probably not fit for an acquisition yet, but there might be an opportunity for us to come in, provide some additional board advisory type services to help that owner get ready for exit. Because there's a lot of things that really need to be in place for that owner to get the golden parachute kind of payday and ride off into the sunset retirement like they all really have been working for. So those are the big things. And then after that, it really depends on the individual investor. Like if all of those things are good, I preferred businesses that have been open at least 10 years. Because the reality is 90% of businesses don't make it past 5. And then of those that do, about half of those don't make it to the 10-year mark. So I want like an established kind of mature company that's been through its hiccups and has established themselves in the marketplace. They're not really still in startup mode. And then to the point that we kind of talked about earlier, that avoiding the dancing bear, because I'm not trying to buy myself a job. Like that's not the greatest use of my time. Although I can come in and run something very, very well, like that's that's not going to serve that company or my other companies in the portfolio at all. So then you look at things like systems, processes, documentation. Like, do they have those things in place? Does everybody know what the expectations are? Is there an employee handbook? Are there job descriptions? Is there a formal attendance policy? Is all the legal stuff in order? We don't want to find out as we're going through due diligence that there's been lots of workplace incidents, or they've been sued for harassment, or like all this other type stuff. And as you uncover those things, you have to make those as kind of assessment as you go along. And hey, yes, I can live with this. No, I can't live with that, because it's really like buying a used car. You're going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb as best as you can, but at the end of the day, you're not the original owner. You get kind of taking on some risk when you buy that used car, whether you buy it from a private seller down the street, or you buy it from a dealership who's gone through it and checked it out a little bit. In that analogy, that would kind of be like a broker. You're always you're trying to assess what's my level of risk and what am I willing to live with is really what it comes down to.
And I know a lot of the when people are buying businesses, it is for, from people who want to retire. They've had
Mm-hmm.
the business a long time. But have you ever come into situations where the person has an established business, they have regular revenue, but I mean, their equipment is like so old. I mean, I've seen optometry businesses like that, and it's like, yeah, they sell it, but man, when the person that comes in, they're going to have to upgrade
Mhm.
everything.
Right. Yeah. You do see that, especially manufacturing, if on the smaller end, if the business owner's not been savvy with reinvesting some of the profits to maintain, or, they're just patching it together to keep it going. That's not uncommon. And, like you said, you'll see that in any industry. And that's just something you have to evaluate. Like, hey, what's the useful life of the equipment that they got? Are we going to be able to, refurbish that, go get it used at new cost? Like, what's the replacement, capital investment required here, and is that going to make this or break this deal in terms of its viability? And a lot of times it can kill the deal, because we're, at least for me, because I'm not a fix and flip type investor. um I I'm I'm not interested in turnarounds. I did that in corporate. I would always fix something, and then a year or two, and then get moved over and have to fix something else. Like, I've done my fair share of cleaning up messes, and I really don't want to do it anymore. That's not to say that there's not people out there that don't specialize in that, because they are. Just for me, that's just not the sandbox that I want to play in. It's just not attractive to me anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing is, again, back to employees or, managers there. A lot of times when a business has been doing things the same way for a certain time, and they might even have a culture where people are complaining often, or,
Hmm.
you know, just let's do the littlest possible. In other words, they're not very productive, but
Hmm.
it's been acceptable.
Right.
So
Right.
when you go in, is there a way when you're actually assessing a business to even find out what is the culture there? Is there a way to detect the culture, or do you have to come in and create that new culture that you want?
It's a little bit of both. Because obviously culture is a huge driver of the success of any business. Uh, so you can kind of get a feel for that in the conversations with the owner. Now, yes, like, everybody's going to be putting their best foot forward. Like, it's like, hey, like, I'm like, getting involved in these conversations. It's like going on your first date. Like, everyone's going to get dressed up. They're going to put their makeup on, and they may even be, if the employees know that the business is up for sale, like, they may even be told, like, to, put their best foot forward too.
Mhm.
And that's where it's as much art as it is science. Like, I've got checklists and worksheets and all this other stuff that I provide the business owners to evaluate the business. And a lot of those check sheets ask the same questions in different manners, and they get it at different stages, because that allows me a pulse check to see what is the consistency here. And then ultimately, I like to walk the business when possible. I have colleagues that do not. I mean, I my mentor Roland, and Matt, like, they will buy, 10, 15, 20, $30 million businesses and never set foot in the place. Um,
Oh.
but for me, because of what aligns for me with my values and stuff, I like to go put my eyes on it, because I can see different opportunities. I want to smell it, I want to feel it, I want to taste it, I want to touch it, kind of deal. Because that culture point is so important, especially with small businesses. Like, the
Mhm.
more solid that team is, to begin with, the lot easier that transition is going to be. And having been in corporate for a long time and been exposed to lots of personalities, and having to manage teams as, big as hundreds down to, small members of salary management, I can usually pick up on the BS pretty quick, just by walking around, seeing what's the working conditions like. Because there's always indicators. I'm sure you see it too. Like, you can walk into an eye doctor's office, and if the equipment is well cared for, things are kind of in their place, like, there's a clear pride in workmanship, like, that's usually an indication that, hey, things are going pretty well here. But if things are in disarray and it looks like nobody cares, well, okay, that's worth investigating. So that's,
Mhm.
one of the big indicators for me. And then, if the opportunity presents itself, just having a casual conversation, even if it's not mentioning that, hey, I'm here to inspect the business because your boss is wanting to sell.
Mhm.
Just coming around, and like, they just assume I'm a vendor or a potential customer. Just having that conversation, and asking, some basic, get to know you type questions, can be an indicator too. And that's where, the sales background and all that other stuff that I've been doing the last few years finances certainly comes into play too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it really helps you get into rapport with people.
Mhm.
That's
Right.
for sure. So you have all this business background. Why don't you just start businesses from scratch? What? you, I've done that before, and I know it's hard.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So been there, done that. And uh been there and done that, got the t-shirt, and then didn't learn my lesson. And so I went and helped another company who was a startup do that with some other companies, the sales company. It's a grind. I mean, it really, really is. It is absolutely not for the faint of heart. And I even alluded to the statistics earlier. You know, the reality is 90+% of businesses overall are going to fail in the first 5 to 10 years. So it's not for the faint of heart. You cannot be weak. It's the startup game really is about who can endure pain the longest. And it's going to
that's
be,
a good
it's
way
going to
to
be,
put it.
yeah,
So
it's going to be,
true.
and that's the game of business in general.
Uh-huh.
Because just because you get past that 10-year mark, there's always going to be another challenge. So I've had that experience. It's just it's not something that I want to continue to invest my time in because doing so, although I can do it and be successful, COVID aside, that killed my insurance business and some of the other businesses I was involved in. There's always opportunities to start something new, but at the same time, the real reality is we're living through the single largest transfer of wealth in human history right now. I mean, over the next 10 years, just in the United States alone, we're looking at about a $10 trillion transfer of assets, of small business assets. Um, about 10 to 12 million baby boomers are going to retire. The youngest of them are reaching retirement age now, and over the next 5 years or so, they're holding about $7 trillion of those assets. And they have nowhere to go with them. Their family does, their family doesn't want them. They don't have an exit plan. The investment community is so small that unfortunately, of those, uh, probably 12 million or so businesses, um, 75% are going to go to the graveyard because nothing's in place. And so why do acquisitions more than anything? That's why. Yeah, I can go spend some money, go do startups, like go hire people. And I've learned my lessons along the way to not make the same mistakes, but ultimately the opportunity to contribute and give back is in the mergers and acquisition spaces, especially over the next 10 years. Because the reality of the wider M&A market is, 20% or so of businesses are going to go are only going to get sold. The other 80 don't get sold. And that's to the tune of, I think there's about 2.5 million businesses for sale at any given time on a year. So you're talking 450,000 of those are the ones that get sold and the rest don't. So that leaves an owner in a tough position. Do I continue working longer than I promised my significant other? Do I continue to jeopardize my health because I'm working so many hours trying to keep the doors open? Or do I close the doors and, the people that have, Susie at the front desk who's been with me for 25 years and, Timmy in the back, let these people down and they're not going to have any place to go. So for me, more than anything, that's why acquisitions versus startups. There's a lot of opportunity to keep the economic engine going and give people the opportunities that they're working hard for.
So I have kind of a double question. The first is, how do you find these businesses?
Mm-hmm.
And if you are one of these businesses, because a lot of people just don't know what they don't know,
Mm-hmm.
how can you raise your hand and say, "Hey, I would like someone to come and purchase
Right.
me," but not like you said, pull me into pieces.
Right. Yeah. So there's there's the traditional route, just like you would sell a house, right? There's a on market listing. So there's, websites that will list both on market, off market listings. There's BizBuy, there's bizbuy.com. There's all kinds of that out there. And much like in real estate, you can go get a broker, you can go get an agent who will kind of assess the process that you have, look at the business, put a value on it, and then you're signing a contractual agreement for however long that broker's contract is for them to sell the business, and they're going to get a cut of that. And much like any other service provider, both on the sell side and on the buy side, on my side of the table, there's good and bad things about that. Like any other service that you go out and invest in. Like, have you ever been to a restaurant? Like, we've all had good service at a restaurant. We've all had bad service at a restaurant. We've all had a good experience at a car dealership. We've all had bad experiences at a car dealership. So it's hit and miss. As far as off-market listings, there's a massive amount of resources that people can use. Outside of your personal network, there's you can connect with like financial planners, attorneys, anybody like that works with high net worth individuals that, they have to inevitably have CPAs, accountants, like all these other professional services. Those individuals can be great sources of finding that information. Social media, LinkedIn is a great source. A lot of small businesses now, more so than ever, do have some sort of social media presence, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or, any of those. That's one. Trade shows. And then there's just the good old fashioned, data mining, right? You can go out and pay for a service like Seamless AI or Zoom Info or all that scrape that data. And then you're doing cold email campaigns and calling and outreach and stuff, which is a lot of what we do and have success at, just because, with the sales background, like that's easy to do. Just give me the numbers and the emails and I'll start calling. And even though that sounds intimidating for someone that may want to get in the space if they've never had, that outbound, cold emailing or calling experience, you would be surprised how receptive people are when they pick up the phone and tell them, hey, I'm an investor. Your business came up in my team's research. I was just calling to reach out, see if you might be interested in selling your business for a fair price. Like, it's really pretty much that straightforward. I've had people in tears on calls realizing, oh my gosh, like, you're the light that I need to walk to. Like, I've heard that on a call. Like, I knew the minute I saw your email that you were my savior. And, well, no, I'm not necessarily your savior. Let's not put me up there yet. But I mean, because business owners, especially the ones that are looking to get out, like, they don't know what to do. 80+% of business owners don't have an exit plan. So just reaching out, mailers, believe it or not, I've got some colleagues that absolutely love doing postal mailers, just, one sheet, old school, Dan Kennedy type, type mailer type stuff. So there's any number of things you can do to find those. And if you're an owner, obviously, you can go through a broker, but I would say, go to trade show events, start asking around, ask your wealth advisor, ask your accountant, your attorney, hey, do you know any strategic private investors? And be very specific, like tell them, like, I'm not necessarily wanting to sell to private equity. I'm looking for an individual, or what would be known in the space as like a strategic buyer. That's who really that you're looking for. Or hop on LinkedIn. There's plenty of us on there, and we're very, very obvious. If you look at our profiles, it'll be in the headline. It'll be on our pages that, hey, like, this is who we are, this is what we do. And just send a message like, hey, I think I want to sell in the next few years. Would you mind having a conversation? I get probably 1 or 2 messages a week on LinkedIn alone from owners reaching out. And sometimes we can help, sometimes we can't. But at the end of the day, like, you're going to have, at least if you reach out to me, you're going to have a clear plan on, hey, yes, I can help you now. Hey, no, I can help you in 6 months. Or, hey, these are the things you need to do and have in place before you really are ready to exit. And if you want help doing that, that's something that my team and I can help with too.
Got it. So this is probably a loaded question.
Oh, I like
how do people know what their business is worth? I know there's like, what do you call them? Evaluators.
Yeah. So there's as much art as there is to science to that. Now, there are great resources out there. It's much like the real estate market. It's based on the people that publish the reports. The industry multiples is what it's known as. Look at what businesses in that category are trending at selling over the last few years as a multiple of profit. The difference is in where people people start getting a little bit off the rocker, that results in what I would call the ugly baby conversation when they start talking with the strategic investor, is because they've overvalued their business, or the broker's overpromised. Because if you're an owner operator, meaning you're integral to the day-to-day business, and this takes some honest self-evaluation. I kind of qualify that as, not, can you take a couple weeks off and everything's fine? Could you take off 6 months? Can you take off 6 months or more? and the business at least maintain, if not grow. If you can do that, you're probably definitely not an owner operated business, because when you're owner operated, the multiples that apply to your business are lower, and it's called seller discretionary earnings versus the big phrase that everyone throws around, which is EBITDA. EBITDA multiples are higher, but those are for professionally managed businesses. So like you've got accounting and bookkeeping in place, you've got a leadership team in place, like you're really at best working on the business. Like you might be involved a little bit here and there to troubleshoot or whatever, but like you can take a month or two off. John, who's been with you for 15 years, he's the shop manager or the clinic manager. Like he knows how to run it. You're just there in and out a few hours a week. That's where you step into EBITDA, and the difference of that can be 3, 4, 5 times profit difference for the same net profit of the business, just by it being professionally managed. So if anything, you can Google those resources, and you're going to want to look for seller discretionary earnings if you're owner operated. But my colleagues and I, like, we give professional business valuations all the time. Now it's not going to be like the full, like, I mean, I've got one right here from one. I mean, we're several pages thick here. But something like that, a full report like that, where they do market analysis and all that, is, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. But we can come in and provide you, a general overview of, hey, here's the things that are influencing the valuation. Here's the things that are good about it. Here's the things that we don't like, and give you a range based on the data that we find about the business. And that's something that you can take to the proverbial bank when it comes to actually listing your business, and say, hey, this is the range I know my business is worth, and it be based in reality, not some big, upcharge multiple that some brokers will put on a business. I've had that a few times just in the last month alone, where we've come in at half of the asking price, and that's a difficult conversation for an owner to hear, who's been in it 20, 30 years. They started it, and they were expecting this $4, $5, $6 million payday on the asking price, and we're coming in with like 1.5 or 2 million, and having to explain why. It puts us on the back foot as being the bearer of bad news, but at the same time, those expectations have to be realigned. Otherwise, the businesses don't sell, and they won't, because unless someone's willing to come in and be that owner operator, which most of the time that's where it happens, is it's an owner operator type role where the broker is kind of overestimating that. Unless someone's willing to come in and buy the job, like it's just not sellable at that price. And so we always tell, like, hey, if you can get 5 million or you can get 6 million for it, like, by all means, go get it. But if not, in 6 months or a year, if you haven't successfully sold it and you want to revisit this conversation, reach back out. We'll be happy to take a look.
So when you go into these businesses, and let's say they don't have an exit plan, so these people want to leave, so you advise them. How do you advise them? How do they get ready for an exit, so maybe a year later or so they could actually sell their business?
Yeah. So in an ideal situation, you want to start that exit planning as far ahead of time as possible. 12 months is doable. In reality, that's very quick. Typically, I recommend 2 to 3 years of planning, because there's kind of this 18-step process you really need to go through to make sure you've checked all the boxes. And the first thing is making sure we're able to get you off the org chart. Like where you're not working in the business, you're really barely even working on the business. And that's probably the first thing I take everybody through when I start to have those conversations, is this concept of the 5 exits of an entrepreneur. Because the role you play in the business is not always indicative of the size of the company. Like, I mean, right now we're negotiating an offer on a company that's doing about, they're on pace to do about 30 million this year in top line, and about 3 or 4 million net profit in EBITDA. But the 3 owners are working 40 hours a week. Like, that's an 8-figure business where they are still in the business as an employee. So we got to move that, we're going to acquire that. That's going to be a pretty significant endeavor. And there can be a long-term transition commitment on their part. But that's the first thing, is move you from the doer to the delegator, get you off the front line, get you, not changing, not cleaning the bathrooms, or, taking orders at the counter and all that kind of stuff. At least get you in a position where you're delegating. You've got management staff in place. Get you to that level. that's going to take some time, because there's systems that has to be put in place. There may be hiring that has to be put in place. And then the next phase to get you from kind of delegating to leading and having you exit the staff, like that's where the real work starts to come in, because there is hiring involved. And you've been in leadership and in offices and stuff for a number of years. You understand the importance. Like, hey, one bad leadership hire can really tank a small business, because it can affect the culture in the office, the performance overall. So ultimately, we've got to get that in place first, and then get you from leading to governing, get you from working on the business to working above the business to, it's 3-4 hours a week maybe. And you're having a meeting with the key leadership, and moving on down the road, doing, going golfing or whatever it is that you're doing. You may still be in there because you want to be, but the business continues to grow. You're looking at everything from like 30,000 foot and being like, hey, this is the direction we need to row. I'm not going to tell you guys the path to get there. We just need to go this way, and then let them go do the thing. And then ultimately, that's where you're governing. You're almost in a board type position, and but you're very certainly off the org chart. That's the biggest part of that 2 to 3 year process, is moving, depending on where you're at, and just those 3 components alone is at least getting you completely off the org chart to where you're just governing the business. You're working above it, keeping track of the numbers, a weekly meeting or bi-monthly meeting, something like that, which is kind of the playground that me and my colleagues play in. My mentor Roland, when he gets involved in deals, his commitment is like a board meeting once a quarter, and that's all the more that he's involved. So, again, that takes a lot of work to get to that point, but we at least got to get you off the org chart, to where you're not integral to business, to really get you that value in exit number of the business, because that could be the difference between a 2 multiple on like say, let's say you've got you're netting 300,000. So on a 2 multiple, that's going to be a $600,000 business transaction for you. Nice little payday. But if we get you professionalized, get you completely off the org chart, that could be, depending on the industry, that could be a 4 or 5 or a 6 multiple. So that 300,000 now suddenly becomes 1.3, 1.5, 1.6 million. So it's a huge differentiator when you want to sell to a strategic investor.
So I want to talk about like social impact. I know you are very mission driven, and what you do is with love and integrity, because I've known you long enough to know that. So when people are looking for businesses, or when your company's looking for businesses, how do you kind of marry the impact you want to have in the business kind of businesses you choose?
It's a really good question. So you really have to have that clarity about what's important to you first, because if you don't have that clarity about what you stand for, what's important to you and why, it's going to be difficult to delineate that and find that in any business that you go look at. And I find more often than not, a lot of people don't really have that level of clarity. You may not necessarily have clarity to the level of, you've got a very specific and defined mission, but you at least need to know who I am, what I stand for, and how am I able to live those and deliver value in the marketplace through a specific business that represents that, right? So to give an example that everyone will kind of understand, because we've talked about my portfolio, like I'm focused on businesses in the Heartland, which for the most part is I define that as you could take like a 300 or 500 mile radius around Nashville, Tennessee. So in that circle, like that's America's Heartland. That's a very geographically specific type of individual in the United States. There's its own culture in this part of the country, where you're looking at, very specific American values, very specific belief systems overall. The only exception to that is Illinois, because it's very much a different climate, because that is driven by policies and things like that in Chicago. And not to get off on the political spectrum, but that's something you got to consider as well. Like there are states that are not very conducive to business environments, and why you see places like California and New York having like this mass exodus, because at the end of the day, political decisions at the state and the federal level do significantly impact businesses. And if you don't believe that, I'd ask you what rock you've been living under, because you must have slept through COVID. So that's the first thing is, hey, who am I? What do I stand for? And what industry do I have expertise in that aligns with that, right? So for me, like, hey, good old hardworking American values, that's manufacturing. if you're going to be in manufacturing, who else has good, hardworking American values? Logistics and truckers. Like, we got to be able to move this equipment around. And then home services, construction. That's trade skills. Like, all of those things are the things that, for me, when you study the history and the growth and progression of America as a country, made America what it has become today, post World War II, through the Industrial Revolution. And we have gotten very, very far away from focusing on those things. We've pushed academia to the level of a fault, and we've kind of shunned all these dirty jobs and working with your hands. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of that. Great things are built by builders. And if you don't focus on builders and give them an opportunity to build, well, what is there? There's nothing. The great Carl Sagan in the 90s has a very prophetic quote, and I'm not even going to attempt to quote all of it because it's kind of long and I don't want to butcher it. But he alluded to the fact that he was deeply concerned that sometime in his children or his grandchildren's lifetime, that America would become a information and service-based economy, and will have gotten away from manufacturing and trade and true creation. And for people that don't know who Carl Sagan is, like, man was ahead of his time, world-renowned astrophysicist, and he contributed a lot to the science industry and what America has become, just because of the work that he was doing with physics and things like that. But he saw the writing on the wall years ago. So for me, that's how I've been able to determine that, because, hey, I'm very, very clear about who I am. I'm unapologetic about it. For any of you out there that follow me at all, you'll see that. For those of you that don't, find me on Facebook, find me on LinkedIn. You'll figure out very, very quickly whether or not I'm your cup of tea or not. And if I'm not, that's okay. I know that, but I'm unapologetically in alignment with those things, because history shows what it takes to be successful as a society. And it's not just here in the United States. It's worldwide. You can study that across multiple cultures, across multiple periods of history, which I've spent a good decade of my adult life really, really diving into, to understand that as I'm making these multi-million-dollar decisions. Because effectively, like, I just turned 40. I'm staking the rest of my life and investing the last 40 years that I have, hopefully, or more, on this one thing. And I may be wrong, but I'm not in doubt. I'm never in doubt about it, because I've put in the time and the work to have that clarity. I'm like, hey, this is the way that I'm going, and I'm going to take as many people along with me. So you've got to get to that level of clarity.
So, and talk about what I was saying in your bio about the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Centers. Mm-hmm. Is that part of your mission? And tell me about that.
Yeah. So ultimately, that's been a progression of vision over time. We kind of talked about that before. Things don't happen overnight. Your success, your career, your family, your life, even your vision. And for the last few years, that had kind of been like my driving why. And over the last year or so, I've really come to understand that isn't necessarily my why. That's the vehicle. That's the next guy. I thought the M&A, the portfolio, was the vehicle to go do that. Well, no, it's the small vehicle to get the bigger vehicle for the bigger why. But the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Centers down there in Williamson County, which is just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. The easiest way to explain it, and I'm going to date myself a little bit because these programs are not popular in schools anymore. I grew up with shop class. Like, that was a normal part of the middle school and educational curriculum, whether it was woodworking or whether it was like actual metal shop, auto body, like trade skills. Like, that was part of the curriculum that you could pick. And some schools that were very supportive of that even had those facilities outside of the actual school campus, and you were there half the day or whatever it is. The EIC that they put together down there in Williamson County is shop class. It's trade school, but for kids that want to be entrepreneurs. If I'd have had that when I was in school, Kimberly, we probably wouldn't be talking today. Like, I would be 15 or 20 years down the road. These kids are walking away with just an incredible opportunity. There are some faculty involved from the school system, because it's for high school credit, but outside of that, for academic oversight, the entire thing is supported by businesses in the local community. Successful business owners come in, volunteer their time. They help these kids write business plans. There was the executive director just had a great interview a couple weeks ago on somebody's podcast. I can't remember who it is. Like, he was telling the story about this marketing problem they solved for the Tennessee Titans. Like, you imagine being in high school and solving a marketing problem for the Tennessee Titans.
Amazing.
Like, it's crazy. But these kids are walking away with business plans, with clarity of understanding. Yes, I want to start a business, or no, I don't. Some of them are walking away with functioning 6- and 7-figure run rate businesses, but probably the most important thing they're walking away with is they're walking away with a Rolodex, connections, resources, people they can pick up the phone and call to get the support that they need. Because at the end of the day, business is a team sport. It is absolutely a team sport. Nobody, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, like, you name anybody, go back in time, Carnegie, any of them, they had people around them that helped them get to where they're at. And the community is so self-aware in that regard that we can't help but help each other out. Those business owners are going to be more than happy to invest some time in that kid when they go to college or when they go start the thing, as long as you're putting forth the effort. So having that Rolodex out of a high school, just, I can't even wrap my head around that. Like, it's taken me over a decade to have the contacts that I have now. These kids are able to start building those up in a 2.5 year time span while they're in high school. It's just unbelievable. When I saw that, because we were looking at moving down there right before the pandemic happened, and then things went sideways and we didn't, I was like, that's the thing. Like, I always knew, like, I wanted to do something like that, but I didn't know what it was. It was just this intangible, out in the ether type thing. And then we were looking at schools down there, and that happened to be the school district. And I was like, oh my God, that's the thing. Like, here's my proof of concept. Like, I have to do this. So that immediately became the why. And now I understand that really that's not the why. That's just the vehicle. Because if we don't, in the United States specifically, start focusing on investing in our youth in a way that they're actually delivering value to the marketplace, not giving them equal opportunity to higher education, because degrees in philosophy and women's study, like all this other stuff, like, it doesn't translate. It's valuable knowledge, but there's no reason to go wrap yourself up in 6 figures of debt to go get a lot of these degrees that are pushed, because there's no translatable skill in the marketplace in the United States. So we have got to start reinvesting in our youth and start thinking beyond 2- and 4-year election cycles. We've got to start thinking generationally. And the only way to do that is to get these kids indoctrinated in something that's of value and worthwhile at an early age. When you're still in high school, you're still very moldable and still very impressionable. So to get the tools from a real world standpoint, not what you're going to go learn in an MBA program in a vacuum. I've audited some. They're great, but I didn't learn anything exceptional that I didn't already know from being in business for 10 or 15 years. Like, to be able to give children that runway, and then knowing that, hey, if we do this at the secondary level, we can start creating a feeder system, just like we do with sport. Like, we're great about sports and all this other stuff. Like, great high school football programs, what do they have? Well, they have a middle school football program, and they have an elementary peewee school football. Like, we can build that. We just need people that are focused on it and understand the importance of that. That's one thing that the Eastern culture, the far Eastern cultures, understand a great deal. When you look at China, or you look at Japan, like, they create 50 and 100-year plans and have for centuries. I don't think that we've really ever done that much at all since probably the early 1800s. You know, obviously with the founders and the founding of the country, but like, as things have progressed, like, we've gotten so short-sighted. We're kind of seeing what happens when you do that. So for me, that's why something like the EIC is so important. And yeah, my goal is to put one on every single school campus all over the world, but first starting in the United States, first starting in the Heartland. And I've got, more on my plate than I'll ever be able to do. Like, putting one in every school campus in the United States is a big enough goal. But hey, Bill Gates wanted to put a PC in every home back in the 70s, and people thought he was out of his mind. And well, there's 4 in my house. I don't know about you or any of your viewers, right. But like, not to mention these things that we all carry around, right? Elon Musk wants to die on Mars, but not on impact. So for me, like, hey, I want to give back to the country that has afforded all of us these amazing opportunities, that is still the beacon of ultimate creativity that can unlock the human spirit like has really never been done throughout human history, and try to protect her as best I can by investing back in that, and to kind of play off of Elon Musk, like he wants to die on Mars but not on impact. Well, I want us to go to Mars because we can, not because we have to. Musk wants to go there because he's concerned that we're going to have to, because we're destroying Earth. And like, yeah, we are, but that's because our focus is wrong. Like, let's go there because we can, not because we've turned Earth into a dumpster fire.
Oh my gosh, I love your passion, and that is so exciting and so valid. I mean, you know, people complain often over the last few years about the school system is broken because, you know, do we really need 8 years of English? Yes, we have
Mm-hmm.
to be able to communicate, but what if you took one of those English classes and had an entrepreneurial class, or a
Mm-hmm.
class on reading a business plan, or
Right.
how to put
Or
something together?
basic financial literacy.
Yes.
Like, granted, a lot of this stuff should be taught at home. Like, I'm not gonna completely bash the school system. Like, the school system has become what it's become because we as parents, we as citizens have allowed it. Like, we've abdicated and delegated our responsibility and ownership. But my goodness, just some basic financial literacy, understanding the difference between an asset and a liability, how to create a budget, and what that actually, and a budget that actually works and functions, and not just, oh, well, I've got this much, I make this much, and this is what my bills are. That's not a budget. Like, that's barely a balance sheet. But like, really understanding what it means to manage your cash flow, and to create specific buckets of expenses, and knowing what bucket should be what size and what percentage. Like, we don't teach any of that. And that has gone on for generation and generation and generation. That's why you see generational poverty. Well, of course we have that. It's not because the people aren't educated or able or willing to break out of it. They don't know how, because they were never like, if your parents don't know something, your teachers don't know something, they can't teach you.
Right.
Like, that's just what it is. So, we need that, to your point.
Mhm. Well, I'm enjoying our conversation, and but we're getting close to the end here. So first of all, I'd like people to find out, where can they connect with you? Where's the best place?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. You can just search my name. I've got a personal and a business profile. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm much more active on LinkedIn. You can search my name on there. If you add Life is Better with Family on LinkedIn, like .com or whatever, you'll find me there. I've got a website, exitmybiz.org. It's like a quick little one pager. There's an explainer video in there that'll help you kind of understand, how we work with companies, especially if you're wanting to exit now, or you're potentially planning. There's a short little video that'll kind of walk you through how we work through that process. But Facebook, LinkedIn are the two biggest ones that I'm on, and put out a lot of content. So if you want to, especially if you're a small business owner and you're wanting to grow your network, definitely connect with me. I don't have a huge following on both. I think between both platforms, I've got maybe 17,000 followers. The bulk of those are on LinkedIn, but I put out a lot of content. I've got a lot of great people in my network, and all of them are actively engaging in it. And that's going to be an opportunity for you to build it, because at the end of the day, your success is going to be defined by who you surround yourself with. And as a small business owner, that is more important now than ever. Get 4 or 5, 6 people around you that are on the same mission, maybe not even the same industry, but they're on the same mission. They understand where you're going, and they're going to hold you accountable to that. Don't surround yourself with a bunch of people that are going to tell you what you want to hear. That's the most deadly decision a business owner can ever make, is to surround themselves with people that are going to tell them yes. You're going to want a few of those. I'm not degrading the value of people like that, because you need your cheerleaders, but you need a few people that are going to be like, hey, like, that's not good, that's stupid. Like, you need someone that's really being willing to kind of proverbially slap you around a little bit, and give you a gut check and be like, that's a really bad idea, and this is why. You need those people that are going to tell you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for
Yeah.
sharing all your wisdom on business and life. And it's just wonderful to reconnect with you.
Yes, absolutely. It was great to be on. I appreciate you reaching out and saying, hey, let's chat again. And then, hey, here we are. So It's always good to come on and have a chat.
Yeah, and to end, I always end with this question. What is your best advice in living an incredible, amazing life?
Oh. Whatever the thing is for you, do it now. Because that's all the more time you got. You know, I'm not very old. I just turned 40 in this past July. And my best friend, my brother, who's, you know, probably closer with him. I had a closer relation with him than most men are ever blessed to have in their life. Like, we met in college, went through Masonic Lodge together. We got knighted as Knights Templar together, started some businesses, some nonprofits. Last August, 39 years old, fell asleep on a couch after work, didn't wake up. That was a huge wake up call for me. I thought I was motivated before, but like, whatever that thing is that you want to do it now. The only thing holding you back is your fear of doing it. And everything, that incredible life that you want to have, it lies outside your comfort zone. It's going to be uncomfortable to go after it, but go do it.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon.
Yep. See ya.